All right, we're going to cover conditions of satisfaction. This is such a broad topic. I'll do my best to be very succinct here. In order to have conditions of satisfaction, which by definition are results-oriented, you start with your rules of engagement, which are behavior-driven. Your behavior is a set of habits. So your behavior, your rules of engagement, set you up for success and or failure towards conditions of satisfaction. Typically, when I'm teaching conditions of satisfaction, it's in an interpersonal relationship basis, typically couples, parents, and children. On the business level, it's a whole different approach. And this today is not so much about business as it is just about, let's say, a husband and a wife, a boyfriend, girlfriend, significant other, or parents and children. So I want to share with you a little bit about how conditions of satisfaction work. Years and years ago, 1981, I had just broken up with my girlfriend at the time. And as I looked around myself, I realized that the current dating process with me at the university level was kind of broken. And for 2 years, I'd been writing down all these ideas of what I want to have and what I want my marriage to look like, because I didn't have any experience of a successful marriage in my life from my perspective. So I was nervous about getting married. So I had written down in this blue book of mine all these points about what I want in a future wife, etc. What I didn't realize is I was writing down my rules of engagement and conditions of satisfaction, but they were intermixed. And every time I would I met Sherry shortly after this, I took Sherry out, and I did this with other girls. I basically would then go down my rules of engagement and conditions, or my book, and ask, how does this person fit up? How do they measure up? And it got to the point where I was literally going on a date with a purpose, called a DWAP, a date with a purpose. So every time I took a girl out, I simply measured her. I had a purpose against what I'm trying to do. But remember, the rule of engagement is I had to be that person too. I had to follow my rules. This may sound trite, but it was big to me. So there were two things that were massive on my behavior list. And one was, in those days, we didn't have the fobs where you could open your doors electronically, right? And I was in Utah, and it was in the wintertime. And so if I opened the door for the girl and let her in, if she didn't open the door for me, that was a message. And that was really important to me. So if she didn't open the door again, I just didn't take her out again. She didn't qualify to go on the next date with me. And I don't want this to sound haughty. It was so important because the message would be, if she's not courteous enough to open the door with 6 inches of snow and it's 32 degrees outside, for me, what will that look like 20 years from now? And then what is she going to teach our children if we have children? That was the first one. The second one was her mode of dress and her style of speaking. So I was very cognizant of those things. Those were important to me. Okay, so fast forwarding over the years as I've studied this, I've separated rules of engagement with conditions of satisfaction. Today is on conditions, but we have to set them up. They only work if you've got the rules, the habit, the container, the foxhole to support those results. So referencing conditions of satisfaction initially, we did this in your foxhole, right? Your environment. So here's a couple of conditions of satisfaction you can do for yourself. I trust and respect myself. I'm civil with boundaries. I focus on what is right and not who is right. And I always question assumptions in the space of who is right. And then I shared with you how the process works. Start the day with a short mindfulness by asking the question, what does it look like today for me to have trust and respect? For me. And what does it look like today for me to be civil with boundaries? That's the spirit of it, right? So that's where we're going. Now, what I'm suggesting is you start small and you practice being perfect. So work through this every day, working on your conditions of satisfaction. Now, here's where we go from here. It's important, let's just say you're struggling in your marriage. We're going to use that as an example. It's universal. It's applicable to everything. That means you've got low trust and you've got low respect. And because you have low trust and respect in the marriage, there's a high probability that you are struggling with it for yourself as well. The probability is there. So after your rules of engagement are set, and I'm suggesting to use the ones that I've already shared with you, no sarcasm, relating, and judging, etc. Make a thorough list of all the qualities you want in your marriage. Just make the list. And here's a rule of thumb. So what I did is during these 2 years, I told you that I was kind of accumulating my data. I would observe somebody or a couple, and then I'd ask questions. How long you been married? What's working? What's not working? Things of that nature. So I just kind of collected data. I came across a couple of couples who said the following: we never argue. And I dated a girl once who said her parents never argued, and then the parents bragged about never arguing. Here's what I write about that type of a scenario. Rule of thumb: if a couple ever brags that they never argue, avoid their advice or example. Couples who claim they never argue, notice the absolutes, are actually claiming that they agree on everything, which is not possible for two people to experience and be authentic at the same time. Therefore, couples who never argue do not experience authenticity in their marriage, and one of the two is unnecessary in the relationship. Dr. Gottman, University of Washington, found that arguing is not a detriment to successful marriages. Instead, he discovered that how couples argue is the determining factor. If they engage in conflict, remember, what is right, same goal, different path, and resolve their disagreements, their marriage is vertically grounded and thrives. However, if they engage in contention, who is right, they tend to move apart and trust and respect falter. I'm suggesting that people are unaware. If they claim that they never argue, they're unaware of the dynamics of what's going on. There's nothing wrong with arguing. The problem is how you do it. Okay, love on the rocks. If you have a big challenge right now, you guys are struggling with getting along, this is to you only. This is not a codependent issue. This is not about your partner. You focus on practicing civility with boundaries. You get your rules of engagement. Have a very good idea, principle-based, what your conditions of satisfaction look like. And then what you're going to do is invite the other person into your space without judgment. If you truly can go neutral, starting with flipping, if you can go neutral, there's a high probability your partner is going to want to join you. There'll be bumps and bruises along the way. But at any time when you move past your rules and conditions to start manipulating or trying to get them to do what you want them to do, you've moved back into that addictive state, and you're getting cortisol, testosterone, and norepinephrine. The conditions are designed as a result that's supported by an environment, a system of behaviors and habits that will support it. Focus on the system. Let the results happen. As a matter of fact, you don't even need the results in advance if you have a system that's designed to get you there. It just doesn't hurt to go ahead and talk about that. So as I mentioned earlier, there's this thing called a DWAP. If you're already married and you want to take your marriage deeper, start going out on dates with a purpose. For example, I had a date once with my wife where it was a 3-day date because we were traveling as chaperones. The entire date was me talking about her teenage years. But I started at age 12, moved all the way to 19. It was a DWAP. It was a purpose. If I'm going out to dinner with my wife, we almost always have a reason we're going to dinner because we want that conversation to be elevated. I want to talk about ideas. There's always the rigmarole of the basics. I'm just suggesting when you understand the relationship between rules of engagement and conditions of satisfaction, it really helps. Now, to conclude this, I'm going to give you just a couple bullet points of different conditions that I've written down that might be helpful within your marriage. Here's a sample. This is from my list and others' lists. I want an independent person with the ability to become interdependent. That was mine. I want a team player. I want spiritual and intellectual testimony of a God, of Christ. That's important to a lot of people. I want them to have political awareness and opinions. They must enjoy vertical conversations. I want them to have TED skills. I want them to be meek. Now notice I'm saying I want them, but I'm telling you, if you're not that person, this doesn't work. So in my marriage, one of the conditions that I had was, before I got married, was whenever I'm around her, I want to be motivated to be my best self. That's a principle-based condition. So I'm hoping you kind of get a flavor. Let me just give you a couple others. In my marriage, I want to operate within the U pyramid. I want her to make me a better person, which I said. I want us both to be service-oriented, artistic, athletically minded, etc., a good teacher, social awareness and skills. Those are all results, all set upon the foundation of rules of engagement. Hopefully that helps you a little bit with your conditions. It's a good time to start writing them. Thanks for listening.